Okay, so let's get into some of the stuff that's happened this week, and really the big thing happened today.
Yeah.
And that is that there is now a new athlete association. And I guess for lack of a better term, it's sort of an athlete union.
Yeah.
And I use that term loosely because there are some differences here, but it's just a group of athletes that they got together, and there are quite a few of them, and it's basically going to help them have a voice at the table when it comes to how the sport is, I guess, programmed and how it grows.
Yeah. We've heard talks of an athlete type association for quite some time.
Right.
I personally think it's something that's been needed to help
Mhm.
kind of organize the collective thoughts and feelings of the athletes in the sport, to help make sure that they have a voice, they have a seat at the table, and to also make sure that like they can have a say in what can ultimately make the sport more successful in all avenues, right?
Mhm.
You look at basically every professional sport, there is a players association. And that players association is a integral part of checks and balances within the sport to make sure that things like player or athlete safety, rules and regulations are being upheld. The best interests of the people going out into the
Right.
arena is involved, as well as being kind of an open forum and another voice to kind of help create a system of best practices top down from for the sport as well. So we're just kind of getting some early. It was officially formed, so it was incorporated. It's a nonprofit.
Mhm.
There's not a lot of details that we can give away just yet, but tentatively, all of the 60 qualified individual games athletes will be members or be invited, as well as a variety of more athletes from
Mhm.
all divisions, age groups, and everything like that. But like the bylaws, constitution of the association are still being drafted, so it's still in its developmental stage, but it has been formed. So teenage athletes, masters, teams, the whole shebang will be involved. They have an interim executive committee, some athletes like Brent Fikowski, Tia Claire Toomey, Pat Vellner, Chandler Smith, Steph Chung, Jen Ryan, who's a masters athlete, I believe, Cole Sager, Adam Knifer, people across the board,
Mhm.
to have kind of a diverse group. A couple of their stated short-term priorities: be able to negotiate with CrossFit Inc. to improve the existing culture, provide a fear-free seat at the table for making decisions about the
Mhm.
sport. Future season and competition planning, competition fairness. So be able to create a system of best practices for
Mhm.
competitions to use and make sure that a certain level is maintained, for everyone involved, and athlete safety as well. So making sure that, and I think that takes a variety of forms, not just from, is this thing going to hurt me, like an individual workout
Sure.
level, but talking about how many times a year can athletes reasonably
Mhm.
compete? What is the total toll? What are some things that can be in the athlete's best interest to make sure they have as best of career as possible, as well as create a platform for up and coming athletes to make sure they have long and healthy careers
Yeah.
as well. So, um,
So some of the questions that sort of popped into my head about this was, okay, I think this is great. First of all,
mhm,
that they're going to be able to go to events and say, all right, well, this is what we do approve of. This is what we don't approve of. This is what we think you need to fix as far as like a safety standpoint. We want to make sure that this if you're going to do this movement, that you have these safety measures on site in order to make it as safe as possible.
yeah,
Um, but I don't, and I think that's fine when it comes to the games season. But with everything being so unknown with the game season, and especially the CrossFit Games themselves, how do they what is how do they mix with the the people who are in charge of that? Like how do they, I guess, interface and make sure that without knowing the events that they're okay with everything? Because I can't imagine Dave and the team at the who are going to be in charge of the CrossFit Games say, yeah, okay, here's everything we're going to do. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I don't necessarily think that's required.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they're going to demand that we need to know everything before we go in. But I think there's a way to be able to create um, a sense of normalcy in terms of like, if something new is going to come down along the line, we can trust that the other pieces are in place to make sure that the environment is created for it to be applied properly, I guess. And that's pretty nebulous. And I think it's going to take some time to iron out. Part of the unknown and unknowable test is still, I think, important in many ways. But I think it's more so for the athletes to feel like they're not going to get railroaded, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Like,
it does. I'm just trying to think. So give me an example what you think like being railroaded would entail.
So, and I don't know if it necessarily applies with the games, but it's when you start adding more events into the mix, and who knows what the sanctional thing might look like, but when you're pulling that many more people into the pot, that's that many more variables that you have to worry about. Is there going to be a proper athlete warm-up area? Is there a good medical staff on site? Is there is the programming going to be fitting to send someone to the games? Is it going to be too much? Is it going to be too little? Are people going to get crushed? And you have to look at areas where the system effectively failed, not necessarily the CrossFit game system,
right?
But you look at something like the OC Throwdown a few years ago, where more than a few years ago now, shoot, it's 2013, 2014, where Kevin Ogard was paralyzed from the waist down. You look at what happened in the programming, they'd gotten beaten up and they'd done triple Fran the night before, some more work, and then came in and we're doing a 3-rep max touch and go snatch.
Yeah.
When your legs are fried, like there are just some standards there where you're kind of like, that's not a great idea. And maybe set some parameters. I think very similar kind of a good situation for this would be kind of how Rich has set a framework for a wireframe for the programming weekend. And we can understand that this is what those pieces might look like. And what they end up being in terms of nuts and bolts is up to you. But we can understand that we're not just being sent to the wolves at one person or two people's discretion or however many people's discretion. And that's not to say that the games haven't been successful and have done a good job. But I think as the sport evolves and grows, there has to be a sense of trust and communication amongst all the parties involved to make sure that we're moving forward with what's the best possible option in mind.
Yeah, and I think it'd be great if this association can kind of come up with a list of, okay, all right, event, whatever you are, like, let's just say it's Wadapalooza. Just throw one out there. Here's what we need. We need to make sure that you have this on site, this medical staff. We need to make sure that your judges are selected from this pool. We need to make sure that your warm-up facility has this stuff. We need to make sure we are given access to X, Y, and Z in order to make sure that we have as much as we need to be not only successful in competition, but also to keep ourselves safe. If you're going to have rope climbs or anything that's 10, 15 feet above the competition floor, we need to have these kind of crash pads just to give events a framework to work into where they're setting themselves up to be as successful as possible, so they can go to the community at large and say, look, we checked all these boxes, we're approved by the association, so you're going to want to come compete here. Because to your point, I think we've heard from athletes before about this, and a lot of it has to do with just exactly what you're talking about. Like, I don't want to get there and find out that the programming is done by someone that I've never heard of before, or that they they're not adhering to certain safety standards. I mean, there are no standards really, but they're not doing certain things. So look, I think this is a great thing. And I think it gives them an opportunity to also have a say in how things are monetized. And what I mean by that is how, what the coverage maybe of the sport looks like to best benefit them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I think so.
I don't know, because I don't know what the details are, but I think that it'd be good for them to say, look, if we're going to be on national TV, here's some of the things that we would like to see happen. And maybe that's
possible.
Maybe that's outside the realm of what they're trying to do, but that wouldn't be a bad thing.
Yeah. Yeah. You see it in other sports too, where, when you have these massive, and CrossFit doesn't have that, But you have these massive television deals and stuff like that. And, there's got to be some say in terms of how the
Right.
athletes are portrayed. It's funny. Another thing came to mind as well when you talk about athlete safety is like a year after that Ogre accident happened, you had the OC Throwdown programming those like hurdle jumps, the 2-foot hurdle jumps where the hurdles would kick over and then they weren't covered
right,
and they were like, people were
Yep.
just like skewering themselves. It's like that stuff thankfully has been weeded out. But I think more importantly than just for the elite athletes, it creates a set of standards that up and coming events and events that aren't for the elite athletes can look at and model after. So you don't have this, backyard brawl type event that is just throwing everyday gym goers, into the wind as well.
Yeah, because I've seen, you've seen, and this is going down to more of the local level. Some of these things that they program, you're like, where did that come from, and why did you think in any realm this was safe? But I'm curious how much this is going to apply to whatever the game season looks like, because we know that's going to change.
Yeah.
And if that goes back to being sort of the standardized test across all of the steps, so you have open, all the same workouts everybody did, regionals or whatever the qualifying stage looks like, if they have all the same events, and then games, how does that then apply to that format? Because it seems like this is a lot more conducive to getting one-off events. And I mean that with all due respect. I'm not trying to say that they're, bad events, but just events that aren't part of a bigger ecosystem to a spot where they can be as successful as possible. And I don't know. I think that's maybe that's what this is geared toward right now, because I know that this has probably been going on for a while and has been put together under the assumption that the season was going to look a certain way, and now it might not. But yeah, I would be curious to see what kind of impact they have on a game season versus a sanctioned event. So.
Yeah. Because I think it's in some of the athletes' best interest to also maintain some of those competition opportunities. We've talked about that in a hybrid system where there aren't a bajillion ways to get to the games, but there are a lot more ways for them to earn a living as a professional athlete. And I think very similar to, I think about the NFL when they're like negotiating additional games and things like that, and percentages of deals. And I just think that the athletes need more say. And I think right now is a great opportunity for them to start to do that.
Yeah.
So they have a collective organization to look after the best interest of athletes and create a set of standards that can be applied downstream for everyone as well. There's going to be a lot of hard conversations that need to happen between now and then, especially with the potential upcoming season coming up and what could be best. Because I think about the NFLPA, and it's like they don't necessarily get a say. Well, they do get a say in some of the new rules that get added, but they're not really like changing. Oh, we get 4 downs, or
Yeah, but I think the best example that we have right now is what happened with Major League Baseball. That the union, the players' union, was instrumental in making sure that things were equal for not only the owners, but for them, and they were as safe as possible. And in fact, we've seen some baseball players who have decided to opt out of the season because they just don't feel like it's safe for them right now. And they were, they played a big role in that. I think the owners, if you follow that at all, and I didn't follow it very closely, but I think they settled on a 60-game season, so they cut the season in half basically. And I think there was a time where it was more than that, and the players, pushed back a little bit. Whereas when you don't have that, the owner's like, 60 games, you want to play, fine. If not, see you later.
Yeah.
And now I think that it's good that when we're not talking that level with games athletes, because that sport is not at that level. But I think it's good. They should have, in continuing with the theme that we've had throughout CrossFit of more people having a voice here, they should absolutely have a voice in some of the things with the sport. And again, going back to the game season, just not sure that if this thing goes back to the something that looks like the old system where programming is standardized across every stage, then maybe they just have to check off on, okay, we want to make sure that judges are pulled from this pool and that if you do these movements, you have these measures in place to make sure that we're as safe as possible. That we're not going to do more than, you're not going to have one day where we're doing like 7 events, stuff like that. So, and I think that all has value.
And it's also, it's important for them to establish now for what the sport could be 10 years down the line from now. Because if the sport gets back to this growth period and continues to expand and become the thing that Eric, the new owner, wants it to be, it's going to befit them now to have established precedent of having a collective organization and to have collective bargaining to be able to, be involved in those discussions later on down the line. So maybe 10 years down the line, they do have some of the things that you see in the NFL or the NBA or the MLB, where it is going to be much more crucial that they started 10 years ago in order to have a voice. So yeah, and I think it could take a couple of iterations to flush out as we go along. Anytime you're trying to organize en masse, it's going to be difficult. But
no, I think it's a good thing, and a lot of questions still about, okay, well, how's it? Are the athletes going to vote on who represents them? Is there going to be? I'm sure they will.
Yeah.
What's membership entail? And then this would be a question: if you're a member of this association, and let's say they all decide to boycott an event, are you tied to that decision? Not that it would ever come to that, but just something that goes through my head, because it's kind of like the NFL, any players union. Like if they strike, you're going.
Yeah.
So
they vote to strike.
Yeah.
Even if it's by one vote.
Right. You're bonded by that decision. Bound by that decision. So yeah, but I overall, I think it's a good thing, and to be continued. We'll get more details on that